Great. Thank you so much for joining us all today. We're really, really excited to share this topic with you. I see from the chat, we have a lot of people coming in from all over the world, which is really exciting. As you'll see as we move along in this presentation, we are going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about a new free model that's really easy to use that can kind of get you started on identifying energy efficiency opportunities at a museum in the US, but there are a lot of things that we can potentially abstract from that for other places in the world. And this might be an interesting model to borrow for other places in the world. So we're really glad that you're here. There are also some other opportunities that we will talk about from Conserve a little later on in the presentation that are applicable worldwide. So thank you so much for joining. I will say just a little bit about the convening of people on this call. My name is Melissa King. I am a preventive conservator working for Conserve, and Chris Cameron is on this call. He is a facilities expert, sustainability expert, and he's running Conserve services. And um, the two of us were, before Chris joined Conserve, were brought into this project from Sarah Sutton, who's leading the presentation, to work on a really amazing tool to help places understand how impactful it can be to make changes when it comes to environmental control, because we are big offenders when it comes to using a lot of energy to control the environment. And it's really not as scary as it looks to make these changes to improve energy efficiency. And this tool that Sarah has coordinated through her group, Environment and Culture Partners, and these other people on the call as well, is a really great resource. I'm really excited for her to talk about it. Misha's going to talk a bit about from the New Buildings Institute, how the tool will work as well. And New Buildings Institute was part of the project as well. So hopefully I did a good job introing, and I can hand things over to you, Sarah, to get going because we got a lot to cover.
Hello, everyone. So glad to see you here. Thank you for making time for this. We think it's really important, and we think it's awesome that you're curious about what you can learn today. So, I'm Sarah Sutton. I am the co-founder with Stephanie Shapiro of Environment and Culture Partners. We are an NGO in the United States, focused in Tacoma, Washington, but we've got people all over the country. And our goal is to help the cultural sector take good, smart climate action. We believe that museums and other cultural institutions, as charitable, educational, community-minded folk, have this in their DNA to do climate work, to care for the community while caring for their collections. And so we do our best to find really great partners to help us look at the biggest problems in tackling environmental and climate work in the cultural sector in order to be better at what we do and to scale the rate of change. So the four of us at ECP are all museum professionals. We started with that work and now we've added the climate work. But we need helpers to do that, and that's why you see all the others on the screen, and in particular, Misha, who is going to talk to you about the dashboard, the tool that is most valuable for you to use from all of this work. Because it takes teams to solve complex problems. So NBI has actually been a partner with us, New Buildings Institute, since ECP started just over 5 years ago. And they were the engineering and the math and science people that helped us look at institutions, at buildings, and try and understand where the energy use was occurring in a way that we could prove to others that there were opportunities for change. And so IMLS, bless its heart, gave us a national leadership grant. Well, actually gave New England Museum Association a national leadership grant for us to do this work that we called Culture Over Carbon. And it was our first in the US in-depth look at energy use and the first way that we could estimate what our sector's impacts are on climate when it comes to building operations. What we found out is the stuff that you're looking at on the screen. We worked with over 200, almost 200 buildings, almost 200 museum, zoo, garden, and historic sites, 9 different types of cultural institutions, in order to get their building operations and energy data to look at their impact. And of all of this information that you see on the screen right now, the top left blue bar is the one that we were really focused on, is that institutions with material collections had the highest energy use. And we wanted to know what that was. We suspected it had a lot to do with temperature and relative humidity. So the team decided we wanted to figure that out, which brought us to the next project, minmax, that we're talking about today. So the purpose of minmax is to figure out if we broadened temperature and relative humidity parameters wider than the flat line of 70-50, could there be savings while protecting collections? Savings in money, savings in energy, and my sweet spot, saving money in carbon. Saving carbon. So just to make sure we're all on the same page of what we mean when we are talking about parameters and what we were using for testing, our work is informed by the BESO protocol and a lot of collections research by Image Permanence Institute, which Chris mentioned, where we were taking the assumption that that flat line and limited range of changes in temperature and relative humidity is old school. It is the before times. It's the dark ages. And that really there was something broader, more flexible, more responsive to what we know about collections and what we know about energy systems and we know about climate change that have to replace that. And I arrogantly call that this moment the Great Awakening, where we can look at this and see that collections-driven choices that pay attention to systems and buildings can use science in order to make better decisions about energy parameters and energy system operations. It's sort of a hard switch to go from something nice and simple and easy to remember like 70-50 to something more complex that is a range. And we understand that. It's way easier to remember a flat line rather than go with fluctuations. But all of you here are professionals. You've been trained in order to care for your collection and to partner with your staff in your museum to run your museum as best you possibly can. All of you and all of us can figure this out. But we could all use a few tools and tricks to help us do it more confidently and more efficiently. And so that's what we're talking about with min-max. What we wanted to do was figure out from a science-based approach, what's the impact on energy use when you change those protocols? You allow for drift, you allow for broader ranges, you allow for setbacks, and what does it do? Can it be done within the science we know about caring for collections? And then if you do that, how does it change your energy use and the money you spend and the carbon you produce? And under what conditions does that work? Does it work all the time? Some of the seasons? Only in some parts of the country? There are a lot of things that we needed to figure out. And so the way we did that, so that no collections were harmed in this commercial, we created an energy model. So the folks at A2 Efficiency were our energy modeling team. And the New Buildings Institute folks were the data and energy input information team to help create a model that helped us test what happens if you change these parameters in a particular building. What are the responses? So the building model you see on the right is a representation of a building, could be anywhere, but it's based on what we learned about from the 8 museums that were part of this project who gave us their building and energy data, and from what we already know about how museums operate. A2 fed that into the model, ran it 100,000, I don't know how many times, but lots of times because we had to wait in order to quantify what those impacts were under different conditions. We took into consideration a lot of things. What part of the country are you in? What climate region? If you're not in the US, what climate region are you in? What is the weather in that area and how does it affect your building? And we gave the model a specific set of parameters to work with. And then we looked at what those impacts would be if you ran the building that way on collections. And as I said, no collections were harmed in this process. No one is guessing. Broadened parameters are based on conservation science. And we know what the risks are. They're well understood because other good people have done excellent research, and we've connected that source of information with our model. All of this is predictable, and the damage is not happening with science-based parameters. But before I hand it over to Misha to show you the magic part that makes it possible for the non-engineers and the mere mortals to use this program, I want to look at why we know this is safe for collections. Now, I'm a historian, not a collections professional. Many of you already know this stuff, but I want to reinforce for you that we had a look at it. So we understand the importance of mold and the impacts of mold, and we know that if you maintain the temperature at the appropriate level, the mold will go or stay dormant. And in no of the situations where we ran the parameters did we reactivate any mold. The fun part about this project, besides having this cool dashboard, is that we've got some of our original museum research partners now in the next, continuing for another 4 or 5 months, testing doing this at home and monitoring their objects in order to ground truth the work that we've done. If they expand parameters, what is the impact on collections? And we have an excellent team member, Al Carver-Cubic, many of you may know, who is helping them with that work in order to make sure that they feel good about the work that they're doing that involves their collections while they're broadening parameters. And so in this case, if we look at relative humidity, you can see there's that broad swath where it's really comfortable for collections, and we're not going over that in this chart. Mechanical damage, well, proofing is the aha moment for me as a historian in understanding temperature and relative humidity for collections care. Understanding that logically, if the object has not been, is not subject to such extreme conditions again after it's experienced them, the damage is not going to expand. We all know that there's a big caveat for that, that if there's been a conservation treatment, then now the treatment has brought it back to better conditions. It's no longer proved. But we know that you know your collections and you know which ones are going to be in the spots where there may be a potential risk. And so what we're asking you to do is use this dashboard and all the information that connects it to energy, carbon, building operations, and then collections care to make the informed decision that you were trained to do on how to care for your collection. And I understand one more thing that the chemical deterioration has been a real interest for folks. And it's worth knowing that the baseline information for chemical deterioration is a highly sensitive type of material. This cellulose acetate is like the most sensitive in my understanding. And so that's our test case. And if we're not triggering that, then we're not triggering it for any other materials. That's why we feel so comfortable and safe with this work. And so now it's time for Misha to have a look to take you through their work and the dashboard that all of you are able to use. You ready, Misha?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. If you want to advance, I do have just a couple more slides for us. Just to introduce myself, I'm Nisha Egolf. I'm a Senior Technical Associate at New Buildings Institute. We are a nonprofit located in Portland, Oregon, and our jam is generally buildings as a whole, and especially codes and policy as well. I have the pleasure of working with Sarah and team at ECP and getting to focus on the cultural sector because we know how important it is. So if you want to go to the next slide, Sarah, I can just give the big, exciting high level, which is, recapping what Sarah had already kind of shared, which is that the models show that we can save significant energy and carbon emissions and thus cost as well without compromising collections following this broadened parameter regime. And if we go to the next slide, we have a kind of handy graphic to just show all of these side by side. This isn't actually in the dashboard, so you all are getting a bonus graphic here. So the takeaway is for the climate zones that we modeled, we saw energy savings from 11 to 26% annually, depending on the climate zone and the HVAC system types. So we modeled two general types of HVAC systems, one with a constant air volume and one with a more variable air volume type system. And I think the kind of key takeaway here is, yeah, there is a range. It depends on your climate zone and these different parameters, but we do see those savings. So, and I think that the other, good news about that is most of those savings are coming from less heating and humidification, and at least in our model, and I'm assuming for a lot of folks, the heating comes from fossil gas, and so reducing that means that you are going to see a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as well. So with that little intro, I will transition. I will steal the screen share, and I'll just give us a quick live demo of what this dashboard actually looks like. This is available on the ECP website, and for now, I just have it zoomed into full screen view, but the actual web page has all sorts of really helpful information to go along with this about the project and a user guide and things like that. But when you first get to the dashboard, we have this overview page, and just to reiterate for the folks who maybe didn't get to join this webinar, what this project is all about and a couple of links that you can use to get more information. Oh, and need to refresh. Had it sitting for too long. All right, so the first thing that you'll want to do is select your climate region, because the results that you'll see all the way through will be based on this selection. You can change it at a later time, but this map gives you an idea of where would be the best climate zone for you to select. We recognize that there are folks that maybe are not located directly in one of these 5 cities or regions, and so we made this map to try to help orient on what might be the best representative location that might resonate most with your results. And so if you're not located in the US, I think that these guiding descriptions, like are you in a more truly cold climate or are you in a more hot, humid climate, it's still applicable and useful. So we'll just keep it on the cold climate for now. And again, you can update this if you change your mind and you're like, actually, I think I want to see what happens in a hot, dry climate. You can still do that. You're not locked in forever. And we have those, again, those 2 HVAC system types. Our prototype model had a square footage of 75,000 square feet, but you can change that if you have a smaller or larger facility. Keep in mind, you're basically just scaling that same, shape and type of building. So there's a point where it becomes maybe a little bit less relevant, but if you do want to kind of scale the results to be a little bit more meaningful, that is an option. We also, if you hover over some of the titles like the system type or energy use intensity, we've tried to provide some brief explanations of those items to help wayfind a little bit. So for the model that was run in the cold climate zone, which was technically Chicago, Illinois, the base museum building had an energy use intensity of 308 kBTUs per square foot per year. And under the broadened parameters, which is that expanded temperature and humidity set point zone, that decreases to 274. So that's still quite a bit higher than your average, let's say, office building, but progress is progress. And so we can see here representation of what I was showing in that previous graphic, that you have this overall reduction in energy, and then that broken down by the percentage of how much of that is being contributed from reduction in the gas consumption versus the electric consumption. And for folks who really want to nerd out and go deep into the details of the energy savings, we have more detailed views into where those reductions fall in terms of coming from the heating, humidification, cooling, or just your miscellaneous like pumps and fans. And if you really want to dive in, you can toggle into the detailed view and you can see month to month how each of these things changes. And this is in the scale of savings. So anything above the line is reduction. We also have this detailed toggle here for this is just the overall energy consumption month over month under the base and the broad scenario. And then we have a little area chart here again in the detailed view if you really want to dig in to kind of follow along with how it's changing the overall shape of the energy consumption. So from there, we can look at the cost standpoint. So again, you can always change your mind about what scenario you're wanting to review here. And we have a variety of cost scenarios for you to explore. So by default, we're assuming a kind of just flat year-round electric rate. But we know that many folks often also have a monthly demand charge. And so we have that option as well. And then also we know that some folks have time of use rates where certain periods of the day are more expensive than others. So basically, as you toggle this menu, you can just kind of explore what scenario might be most applicable to your situation. And we also have the option here for a custom flat rate for your electricity, which you can then, if you select the custom rate here, then you can update this so that it can be more reflective of what your experience is. The gas cost is just assumed to be static year-round. So then our next view, which I know might be Sarah's favorite. I don't know if she would play favorites, but if she would, I bet this would be it. This is the greenhouse gas emissions. So again, same menus that you should be familiar with at the top here, but we've just got an overall annual estimate of the annual greenhouse gas emissions under the base and broad scenario and how many metric tons of CO2 equivalent reduction is a result of just this relatively simple, on paper at least, just expanding those parameters. And for a comparison of other building types, we have here the annual greenhouse gas emissions. This is just from the EPA, just standard information here for the US, from a grocery store, an urgent care clinic, a K-12 school, so you can kind of see how museum space might compare to those. And then everyone loves an equivalency, of course, so we have some equivalencies to how much this 194 metric tons, because I know for me that's very hard to visualize, what that might relate to into something a little bit more relatable. So then kind of pivoting to the more detailed look at what actually happens with the temperature and humidity under this modeled scenario, we have a new drop-down menu here related to what portion, what section of the museum, so to speak, you want to look at. So, so far we've kind of already predetermined the regions that you're looking at, or it's the museum as a whole with its annual usage. But here you can really start to get into, okay, I want to look at what is happening specifically in an exhibition space under this modeled control scenario. And so you can select that, and it will show you each one of these dots is every hour of the year. And we have it just broken down into quarters here to try to make it a little easier to see. So you've got your humidity on the y-axis and your temperature on the x-axis, and just showing that everything is kind of clustered pretty close within these bands of what we might consider the 70-50 tolerance window. And so we are seeing that in the winter months, the temperature does go a little bit below the typical 70-50 band. But not anything, again, that we feel is overly alarming that would impact collections. And otherwise, everything is clustered pretty closely, except for this one random hour here. Not sure what happened there. We can also look at the storage space, which if you review the user manual and kind of how things were modeled, we did have a slightly different control logic for the storage space. So that's why this trend looks a little bit different. So that's just something to note there. And then otherwise, just looking at kind of what's happening in the general museum spaces, and this is the default. So if you really wanted to kind of dig into, I want to know what happens in the spring, because that's when our weather is kind of the wildest where I live, you can use the drop down for that. You can also zoom in if you really want to get into the details, and you can always click the little home button to zoom back out. And then we have a monthly detail, again, just showing kind of more the range at a quick at a glance, hopefully easy to understand format for both temperature and humidity. You can use that toggle there. So then last but not least, we have our view that just affirms the results related to collections. So we looked particularly at those three metrics that Sarah introduced: mold, mechanical damage, and this time-weighted chemical deterioration indicator. And so this is just validating for what the scenario you've chosen, that there was no episodes of risk within, and we defined, certain time periods as what we felt was the risk threshold based on the science that Sarah mentioned. And if you would like more information about these, just a very brief version of this, you can hover over the titles. If you want more information, again, the user manual goes into great detail about the calculations and decisions related to this. And we have here the kind of hourly detail of how this chemical deterioration indicator changes over the course of the year, and then what the annual average is as well. And so from there, you can return to the start, do it all over again. You can always also toggle backwards using the buttons here. So that is the high-level overview. I would love to have Sarah share slides for us again, and I will tell you a little bit more about our next steps. So, oh yes, just a plug for the user manual and also a quick start guide that we have available. Again, that's on the ECP webpage where you can find the dashboard. You can just click to open these and get a lot more information, as I mentioned in the presentation. And then if we go one more slide, I will just share that, as Sarah mentioned, we do have participating museums in the project that are actually piloting these expanded set points, these expanded parameters, and we will have results of that. We'll have case studies for their experience. We'll have an overall report kind of summarizing everything in February of 2027. So we have a QR code here if you want to check out the dashboard, share it with others, of course, and I believe there's also an opportunity on that webpage to sign up for updates if you want to follow along with the project and get the results when we have them next year. So with that, I would love to pass it off to, I believe, Melissa to talk a little bit about their modeling effort.
It's me. Thanks, Misha. And lucky everyone on this call, you get to get a little preview of some of the stuff that we're thinking about at Conserve and where we're hoping to head next. And one of those are working on a more site-specific model, which I think is a nice progression from what we see from the work that the dashboard that Misha just explained. A lot of museums already have environmental sensors installed all around the building, reporting data from individual spaces, where the collections are, where we're most concerned. And we want to use that data to build something that is more specific for your building, utilizing actual weather data and historic weather data and the data from the spaces, so we can have a better sense of what might happen on an individual space level. If you can hit next. So layering on top of that, we are concerned about collection risk as well. So we will also be modeling the risk for various material types, different types of risks that we're worried about for those material types based on conservation science, with models that we already have in the Conserve system and also models that we'll be bringing in as we move along in our project. Hit next. And then the final piece of the pie is to try to understand the actual energy that requires our museum to run. And we can do that through a very simple utility bill to understand generally how much the whole building is requiring, but we can also understand more on an individual level, potentially what certain equipment is requiring in terms of energy costs. And we can build that model out based on energy data as well. So we can have a better understanding of, when we make these changes, how much energy will we save, particular for the building. So you can hit next. And then future versions of this model will be more predictive. So especially if we have real-time data coming in and giving us readings, we will be improving that model over time and the accuracy of the model. So let's say, for example, you have a power outage. That is actually golden data for our model to understand how your building performs when the weather is like so, and there's no power in this part of the system, and these spaces perform this way. We have real data to improve upon our existing model. And so what will be nice about that is we will then be able to use this model to make recommended adjustments to help with evaluating risks. Let's say, there might be a big hurricane coming through and you want to understand how your system might perform with certain exterior weather. And then also try to evaluate the efficacy of certain projects if you want to make upgrades to your infrastructure. And then as a final call to action, if you go back, we are looking for pilots. And you don't have to be a Conserve customer to do this. We can use existing data from any other types of data loggers. So please reach out. We have a couple of, I'll send a follow-up email to everyone that attends the call, and you can reach us that way. But yes, if you are interested, we would love to talk and we can learn more about how that would look like for your site. So I'm going to pass things over to Chris. Just a quick introduction. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Chris is new to the team. We're really excited to bring on his expertise, doing a lot of hand-holding with sites as they make these changes to move towards more energy efficiency. It was a big reason why Environment and Culture Partners brought him on as well, just because he's walked a lot of people through some of these changes. So he's going to talk a little bit about how we might be able to help you if you are considering making the leap in terms of reducing your energy costs.
Thank you, Melissa. Again, my name is Christopher Cameron, Director of Conserve Services. I came to Conserve just a few weeks ago. In the past, I've spent the last 13 years in the field. I have worked with worked on my own for a few years as Sustainable Heritage, and also many of you may know me from previously working at the Image Permanence Institute. I have now coming to Conserve. Next slide, please. Now coming to Conserve, we'll be introducing the Conserve services. We'll be working on offering facilities and mechanical system assessments. And these are open to any institutions. You don't have to be a Conserve customer, regardless of what system you use, what software you're using, what type of loggers you're using. It's open to all institutions. We can look at mechanical system assessments, kind of assess the mechanical systems you have. Can we use them better? Can we get them to function better? Are there components that may be out of date, may need to be replaced? We can do an energy efficiency analysis, so we can look at your mechanical system and give you an assessment of, are we using your system appropriately? Are we wasting any energy? Are we cooling when we shouldn't be cooling, or heating when we shouldn't be heating? Are we heating too much? We also can offer mechanical system design and reviews and some capital planning. Basically, look at before you're thinking about a new project. If there is a new build coming up, if there is a new design coming up, work with your team and be the voice of the collection with that design team from the beginning, and help make sure that the voice is heard, that the collection is being taken into consideration. And I've done this for a number of institutions as well. Next slide. One of the things we're actually really excited to offer now with Conserve is what we call data analysis, remote support. We're going to be offering some office hours. So if you have data, you just don't know what your data means, don't know how to read your data, you're having some issues and don't know how that affects your collection space, you just like to find out some more about whatever's happening in your facility, please feel free. You can there's the link at the bottom, the QR code at the bottom. You can click on that and be taken to a page to really just set up a 15, 20-minute, half hour, what fits your schedule. Time to just look at that data and get an assessment for what's happening in your space. And we also are offering some, we can help you set up an environmental management program, even collection environment consulting, if you want to, set up a brand new program from the beginning, or if you want to review your current collection spaces and say, are we making the right environment for our collection currently? Next slide. So the one thing that comes all together, both for the services I offer for, or for the services Conserve now offers with me, for what we're looking to do in the future, and for what Sarah's talking about is your energy data. So your next step, the next step for anyone sitting on this call should be to try and reach out and get the energy data for your facility. It usually requires reaching out to your energy service provider. You're going to request all energy sources, whether it's gas, oil, steam, electric, may require reaching out to 2 or 3 organizations, depending on where you are. Your facility or accounting staff may have all that information. Facility may know who you're using, and accounting may know who pays the bills. So it's a good way to, get that information. Call, or actually, a lot of them have websites you can go to. Bring that information when you get it into the Energy Star system, and that Energy Star typically requires about 12 months of information to get a good read on energy. And don't want to scare you, don't want to make you think it's hard to get. Depending on where you live, some states make it very easy to get. I think it's California offers a site that you can go to get all that energy in one location. And there are other organizations. In New York City, the energy provider there, and I can't remember the name, does have for a website, you request the energy and they can help you upload it to Energy Star directly, kind of saving you one step or one little issue there. So really just a critical step to help you get your information started for both myself, because I use this for doing assessments. Sarah uses it to build a program, and Conserve will use it for the new software. So it just helps everybody get moving with us and out analyzing the energy for your spaces. So I'll pass it back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry, the video was giving me fits. Let me share the screen. Oops, I was already sharing, sorry. Thanks for the very nice lead into the Energy Star conversation. All of us, you can tell, the 4 of us have worked together before. We have shared interests on understanding energy use in institutions to save them money, make their buildings operate better, care for collections, and reduce carbon. And one of the allies we have in that is the free resource of Energy Star Portfolio Manager out of the Environmental Protection Agency. We have friends there, particularly Misha has friends in high places, and has helped us work with them in order to think about how could we create a way where museum information is it is a much more common practice to upload the information the way Chris was talking about. There are more of us who know how to do it and are helping each other do it. And there's information that is useful to us as individual museums to understand our own performance and compare or benchmark with the rest of the museum field. Right now, there isn't one of those categories. There isn't a museum category for performance in the EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager. But they're interested in seeing if such a thing could be created. But Energy Star can't go out and do a campaign that says, hey, send us your information. But all of us can. So ECP and NBI are conducting that campaign right now and asking all of you and all of your brothers and sisters in museums to consider participating by sharing some super important information. So what is this information request? This is an independent effort. There are no promises that it goes into Energy Star, but there is every expectation that if we come up with good quality, broad-based data, we can create a game-changing resource that helps us all think about our energy performance. So we're doing the collections part, and I'm going to give you a QR code in order to participate in that. And we're going to share it with EPA in hopes that they can turn it into this score. But what I really want you to understand is why it's important. Is that right now when we use Energy Star and we do any benchmarking, we are in the entertainment and public assembly category because no one has asked for this number before, which means that we get to compare our energy use with bowling alleys and bars and movie theaters, which is basically useless information for us. But we know that if we want to make our own progress, or we want to comply with expectations in the city, the state, the county, or eventually the federal government, what our energy performance is, We want to have a legitimate number to be benchmarked against. When those guidelines come in, and they have started in cities and states around the country, they're using that public assembly scorecard, and it doesn't make sense for us. We want to create something for the field that reflects the field's work. And to do that, we need your participation. We need your energy and building operations data. Now, we have a fair amount of experience doing this work. Remember that original project, Culture Over Carbon? We established in our own confidence Carbon Day, which is June 16th, and we've done two data gathering moments in 2023 and then just recently in 2026, where we took relatively small data sets, but what we had was available to us in order to understand what our performance is in the museum sector and to compare that to expectations in various locations. And you can see how sometimes we're outperforming the expectations and sometimes we're underperforming the expectations. Now, this is just with a small grouping of people. We need to get up to the point where we've got 300 folks in order to establish a good data set. But we've had the personal conversations with the folks who run these benchmarking programs, the compliance programs in cities, where we've said if we can give you an alternative path for comparing museums to their own for performance benchmarks rather than the ones that you're using now, will you accept a museum-directed path rather than the generic one in order to document improvement in performance and avoid any fines for failure to perform? And there are some institutions where they're going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars if we can figure out how to pull this off. Doesn't mean that they don't have to improve their performance, but they should be able to improve their performance reasonably based on the professional expectations or requirements of caring for collections. So we're asking that folks will join us in sharing this energy data that you would be collecting in order to work with Conserve on the services that they're asking, and just to operate your building properly. And you might find that the folks behind the scenes at your museum are already doing this work. These are the folks, we've got 50 folks who've participated in the survey already. This is the coverage we have nationally. It's really quite good, and we want to cover every single one of these states, and we want to get to a solid 300 number. So here are some of the folks who are already listed. Perhaps there are some folks on the screen today that have already participated, and we want to thank you for that. We are going to solicit participation using your 2025 energy data until we have enough to do this benchmarking. So if you're able to share with us your 2025 energy data, it'll be part of creating a national benchmark for museums in the United States. That's something, and we'd really love to have you be part of it. So you can use this QR code to get to it. You can also go to the ECP website, which is ecprs.org, because ECP was not available. So please feel free to come to the website and see if you'd like to participate. We'll be glad to help you get your information included. Misha and the team are already doing that with others, and we'd love to have you along. All right, I think we're ready for Q&A, and I'm just going to close my screen now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Sarah, you can leave the screen up with the QR code if you want for the and just
Sure.
speaking of which, something I did want to mention, I know there are some people on this call that aren't in the US, and the Energy Star is a US schema. So we've already started to compile some other schemas for other places around the world that we would love to share with you all if you're interested in researching what's available to you. And if you have any that you know about, feel free to share in the chat because it's super helpful. All right, let's jump into questions. Okay, so one of the questions is this data collection strictly limited to museums proper, or could it take into special collections libraries? Do you want to answer on behalf of minmax, and then I can answer for Conserve?
I would say for minmax, a collecting institution with materials, not living collections, so not botanical gardens and zoos. Um, Misha, science centers, though, and children's museums are part of the categories as well, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is
Mhm.
technically another effort that is a little more nascent for libraries specifically, and they're considered slightly differently, but I think we would welcome your participation, especially for Special Collections Library. I think that that's well aligned.
Amazing. Okay. And then for Conserve, no, it doesn't matter. You could be a research laboratory if you wanted, technically. That's not who we're targeting, but because we're going to be using real sensor from real spaces and collecting some context of the building, it really is site specific, so it could be applicable to any place. All right. Some of our strict here. Okay, so this is some of our strict environments are in response to grant funding requirements, like the NFPF requires adherence to IPI specs or cellulose acetate film. Is it too early to know if those agencies or standards organizations are considering this new approach? We'll be stuck until those requirements allow broader environmental settings.
Uh, yes, this is a known condition. And uh, we understand that what we're trying to do is change the culture in institutions, and that the culture is reinforced by a lot of legal aspects, including loans. And but there's really good research out there about how actually this is more a habitual approach that has gotten embedded in legalese and in our minds as if it's an insurance thing. So we have a lot of aspects that will have to change, and critical mass of participation and good experience and demand for change will eventually get us there. But we recognize that not everyone can test this. I'm still hopeful, though. Very hopeful. You have to be an optimist in this work.
Okay. Um, Somebody said a recent webinar by Conserve on mold, which was last week, used 65% as a threshold. This webinar is using 70%. How is 70% reached as the threshold? Um,
I might have been misleading. It's not actually a threshold. That's like a the outlier danger zone, but not that the parameters were set to that. Apologies.
I think there's also, from my understanding, there's a lot of literature out there about mold and people say different things. So I think sometimes different thresholds are referenced. I think that you all are using the Image Permanence Institute mold risk index thinking behind
Yes.
that. That's also what we use at Conserve too. And I'm pretty sure 65%, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the same. So yeah.
So the mold risk goes if you're even if you look at dpcalc.org, the mold risk will go off when you cross 65. So when you go over 65, but depending on what the temperature is, it could be like 300-400 days when it's over 65. When you get up to 70%, that significantly drops to like 100 days. So depending, who you're talking to, some people are a little more, I can't say relaxed, but I've met some people who are like, well, at 65, you still got, almost a year to mold. So I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with that. I'd like to still not hit that range. But depending on who you talk to, they have that flexibility. And like I said, you play with it in DP Calc. Just play with the sliders, and you'll see when you cross 65, it's like, depending on what it is, I think at 70 degrees, it's like 450 days. But then if you raise it to 70%, it drops to 111.
Hmm. I'm going to sneak in one of my own questions because I think it's worth mentioning. Of all the institutions that participated in this data, there must be some really good case studies that come out of this. Are there plans to share case studies and kind of learn a little bit about how this process has been for people and learn lessons learned, that sort of thing?
Yes, there's definitely a plan to share case studies. And some of that is about, hey, we did this and it worked. And some of it is about, hey, we wanted to do this. We found there were some barriers we had to address first. These are the things we did to address the barriers. So it's the case studies won't be just about objects' response to collection and how much energy they saved or carbon they reduced. it's as much about how do you engage in this process in your institution by informing people, by identifying the correct space, by assessing your HVAC systems and your building systems in order to understand how they're going to respond, and then testing the work. Well, doing conditions assessment, then testing the process, conditions assessment, and continuing to very carefully roll it out. Chris, do you want to add to that? You've been in on some conversations about that.
I was muted. No, I think that pretty much covered it.
I want to say I know I'm like so eager to talk about some of the case studies that I've heard as being part of an internal participant in the minmax research. But I will say, hopefully this is okay, that there is a very well-known institution that shared their data, and it was pretty remarkable. They had set points that were very narrow, and we're seeing lots of fluctuations and hardly ever staying within that range, expanded the parameters, and the fluctuations have lessened. So in reality, the environment has actually improved by making this change, and they're saving a lot of money. So there's a lot of win-win-win situations here that makes it really worth evaluating, because when we have these tight thresholds, our system is often fighting itself because it reaches a threshold, turns on, and then has to kick on again to get back to that same threshold, and it's too much. We just got to give it a break. It also extends the life of the equipment as well. I don't know if you want to add anything, Chris, to that.
I will jump in because from what we've seen, from what I've seen, I mean, again, the number of institutions I've worked with, oh, despite where you are, there's hesitations like, oh, I live, in Florida, we can't do this. Our institution's older, we can't do this. I have been surprised by a number of institutions I've worked with that, they can make these adjustments and not see the fluctuations that are assumed that are going to occur from their changes. We'll make a little bit of change, but we're in an old building, so it won't hold it. I've seen old buildings do some amazing things with setbacks that are assumed they're not going to happen. I worked with an institution in New Orleans that we did a shutdown. We weren't expecting any results. They were expecting poor results from the shutdown. We were scared to do it, because of what they were expecting. And the building held for 4 hours in the middle of summer during, overnight in a shut. So you really never know with your facilities. It's good to test these out, because if you're just going with assumptions that it's not going to work, then obviously you'll never take that step forward.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to hear more of those case studies, and I want to share them with the world because they're pretty impactful. Okay, I have a few more questions. I will try to get to all of them. One of them asks, generally speaking, with the model, how is the risk calculated if the collection types are not specified? I'll let you go first, and I can weigh in if you need to, because I know I was part of that process, but uh,
Sorry, I was reading the chat and I missed the question.
how is the risk calculated if the collection types are not specified? I think we're talking about collection risk for the min-max dashboard.
So
That's a Misha question.
we generally, as we mentioned, we followed the IPI guidelines for, in terms of the metrics and the logic and all of that. So I would say that's the best answer I can give. We didn't tailor the model to specifically define certain collection types. It is kind of the general guidance best practices. So, but Melissa, it sounds like maybe you had some things you
Yeah,
wanted
I
to add.
mean, it's it's showing you what range the humidity and temperature is going to be. It's kind of leaving a little bit of that assessment on you as a viewer to a certain degree. And what we did when we were looking at the real data of the changes, we evaluated what types of collections they had, and we combed through it and mentioned if we were concerned about any of the risks for collection types as we built the model. But there was a pretty broad base of material types. So I think we have some pretty good coverage in terms of that. And then in terms of the model that we're working on, we will be requiring some specifications for material types. I mean, there's only so much you can make. I mean, you can talk about wood, but there's so many different types of wood and how it's arranged and how the wood was cut, and is it, cross beams, and that's, there's a lot of variables, and it can be hard to address every single risk, but we will try to make it so that you can dig in. We're trying to make our model adaptable to be able to plug and play different types of risks, collection risks, models that are out there so that you can kind of get the full picture if you want to dig in. Okay. And then I'll do this one right here. Some winters we turn our HVAC off entirely to keep our museum cool enough in the hot, humid region, which is the southeast of the USA. Can the dashboard calculate the energy cost of the total shutdown over a season?
Not inherently, I would say, the data in the dashboard are a little more broad than that, more general. But I think if you had questions, I mean, it sounds like a great question for Chris in terms of that, but I think you could make some assumptions about um, using the energy by month graphic and then just saying, okay, if I know that my HVAC is 30% of my energy's consumption for that season, just cut that chunk out because it's just completely off to kind of make your own new line chart, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I would agree with that. Yeah, that's one of the issues we had in the past, years ago. We're trying to quantify the energy during shutdown. When I first got in the field, and that's one of the not obviously using the dashboard, but trying to tell someone, if this unit is representative of 30%, 10%, whatever of your energy usage, then just to assume that you're missing that during that shutdown. Because at the time there were long calculations we could do, but it wasn't very easy to quantify for some systems.
Yeah, more work to do, I think, in terms of modeling out those individual use cases for sure. All right, well, we are just about at time. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you registered for the webinar and indicated that you're interested in a one-on-one session with Chris and I, we will be reaching out to 20 people that were on this call. We wanted to make sure you came. But I will also follow up with an email with some links that we discussed, just so that you have them. You can get access to the dashboard if you missed it. But thank you so much, and please keep in touch and reach out if you have any questions. And thank you.
Thanks, everybody.